you're with ET now. This is the India development debate, the one debate on news television that puts the spotlight on development and policy issues. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthi in Mumbai. Joining me in Delhi is my colleague Supriya Shrinate. Straight to the big debate tonight. Is death penalty a deterrent against sexual abuse of minor children? Days after the government rushed with an ordinance, legal experts are a divided lot over the effectiveness of the new law. Pointing out the abysmally low conviction rate in rape cases, critics of this law say it will only endanger the lives of the victims. They also say there are some inherent flaws in the law which stipulates that the investigation has to be completed within 2 months. There's also the fear that the 2-month deadline for completion of the trial could only help the accused walk free.
The supporters of the new ordinance, however, argue that a strong law is the need of the hour. More importantly, it will also give a sense of assurance to the victim and her family, is what they point out. The intentions may be good, but like some argue, is the ordinance a misconceived law that is doomed to fail? Also, in a country like India, where very few rapes are actually reported and there's a huge underreporting that happens, what meaningful purpose does the new law serve to curb child issues? And more important than anything else, is the new ordinance all about scoring some brownie points in an already vitiated political atmosphere? Death penalty for child rapists and its effectiveness on curbing sex crimes is what we're discussing right here on the India Development Debate. And joining us is a special panel right here. Hitesh Jain represents the BJP. Shama Mohammed represents the Congress Party. We also have former Supreme Court Judge Gyansudha Mishra, Soumya Saxena, former member of the Justice J.S. Verma Committee, and of course Alok Srivastav, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, who's also one of the petitioners in favor of death penalty for the sexual offender. So thanks each one of you for being with us, and I really have to start with you, Alok, because you in some sense are spearheading this plea and all of that. The outrage has got us an ordinance. But will it stop child rape is really the big question, and that's the idea of this whole debate. After all, it's the Delhi High Court, and we're not saying this. The Delhi High Court has asked two big questions. It asks whether any victim has been hurt, and in the court's own words, if the punishment for both murder and rape is the same, it has huge consequences. The question really is, will death penalty act as a deterrent against child rape? A question that not just we, but the Delhi High Court seems to be asking as well.
Right. I'll explain it to you. Despite enactment of POCSO Act in the year 2012 itself, there was no decrease in the crime sexual violence against small children. Rather, by the end of 2016, the number of crime against sexual violence against small children rose to 110,000 prox in India. So why there was there was alarming increase in the number of sexual violence was because the existing POCSO Act was not able to work as a deterrent, and that is what was observed by Honorable Supreme Court of India in 2016 in its landmark judgment called Supreme Court Women Lawyers Association, in which Honorable Supreme Court was examining the plight of a 28 days old girl child who was raped. So Supreme Court in a very categorically stated that this POCSO Act requires to provide more severe punishment so that the punishment may act as a deterrent. So genesis of death penalty given by the central government in the recent ordinance is not some knee-jerk reaction, rather it is coming from the Supreme Court's observation in that 2016 judgment. In the PIL which I have filed, Supreme Court has reiterated the last observation made in 2016 and once again has requested the Parliament with fond hope, and that is the language used, that you please provide severe punishment so as to stop the sexual violence against small children. While saying so, and while I am categorically and I am forcefully saying that death penalty will definitely act as a deterrent, I must add to say that death penalty alone or death penalty in isolation will not act as a deterrent. If you want death penalty to cause fear of law in the minds of the rapists, you also need to provide it in the most expeditious and time-bound manner. So, although death penalty is a huge welcome step towards acting as a deterrent, but you have to complete the entire process in the most expeditious manner, and both clubbed together will only act as a deterrent.
Okay, I take that point, like you're saying that alone is not enough and more needs to be done. We will debate what else needs to be done, what more needs to be done, what are the deterrents that we need to put in place. But Soumya, you were a part of the Justice Verma committee that was formed after the Nirbhaya rape in 2012, and there was a lot of public pressure, a lot of clamor for stringent laws, and the committee observed that there is considerable considerable evidence that the deterrent effect of death penalty on serious crime is a myth. Why was that the view of the committee, and why do you believe that has been ignored by the government while making this ordinance? What is your view on this ordinance, and do you believe it's been done in haste?
Right, I'm really glad that you asked this question about deterrence, because trust me, I mean, I heard the person who went before me and they said that this was not a knee-jerk reaction. I mean, I wish they had actually consulted some studies, because you know, it would have shown them that in majority of cases, in particular in crimes against children, the people involved in committing these crimes are actually related to them. Most of these crimes happen in a familial setting, and in most cases we have the parents of the child who try and stand up for the child. Right? But the moment you introduce something like the death penalty, it actually deters reporting. And I'd like to correct the gentleman who went before me. He also said that there's been an increase in instances of crimes against children. Let me point out to him that there has also been an increase in reporting and not just the occurrence, because in a lot of ways what we've tried to address is the stigma that is attached to rape. Now, the second point that I want to quickly make is what the Delhi High Court has also said, which has kind of schooled the government on how hasty this measure was, that the moment you have the same punishment for death and rape, in many ways it puts your victim in way of further harm, because in order to erase the evidence of rape for which they will get death penalty, they go on and commit the murder to ensure that, you know, if death penalty is something they'll get regardless of whether the victim is alive or not, they want to make sure that the victim doesn't survive to sort of give her testimony. Now, this is important to me because in a lot of ways when we act in haste or when government legislates, we expect that they would actually think about these legislation, and ordinances aren't really well thought out laws. We could have, like the previous, you know, time it happened, that there was an incident that shook public conscience and you had a commission look into it. We gave you a report in a record 29 days and that went on to get implemented in 2013 amendment criminal law. They didn't do any such thing in this case. And the other problem, and this is the last point I'll make right now, the problem that I have with this discourse is the way in which they structure their arguments. They make it seem that if you're making an argument against death penalty, we aren't adequately shaken by what has happened. But let me point out to him that if it was really a reaction to Kathua case and how brutal it was, the government should have known better than to think that in case of Kathua, there is already death penalty on the table. So I'm not going to accept the fact that the government just didn't know that in this case there was anyway death penalty. If they're really trying to show that they care about every victim of child sexual assault, they should have done some studies to see that rape occurs through people, by people who are known to these children. And the moment you put in death penalty, that will affect your conviction rates. You can see in the case of Nirbhaya, there was death penalty, were they given it? There's just a lot more to think about than this knee-jerk reaction that pleases all. I'm not for populist measures. I'll have to point out that the government needs to behave differently from a Twitter troll, which responds to public sort of sentiment without any studies.
Soumya Saxena, I get your point on board, and I think there is this the reason why we are doing this debate is because perhaps the law needed to be vetted by experts. Perhaps more data needed to be taken into consideration. But, you know, to our viewers and to everybody who's watching this show, I have to re-emphasize that we are absolutely for the harshest penalty to men or to anybody who perpetrates a crime like that on any child in India, a girl or a boy child. We are absolutely for the harshest punishment. Let there be no doubt about this. But the reason why we're debating this law is because the law can always be made better. It needs to be more foolproof. It needs to be without lacunas. I'm going to take this across to Justice Gyansudha Mishra. And ma'am, I have to ask you this question. The point that Soumya Saxena makes is very relevant. 95% cases, according to the NCRB, involve accused who are known to the victims. 1.6% of rapes are committed by immediate family members, over 8% by other relatives. There is concern that they could be underreporting, and they could be more underreporting given that there is now death penalty that's attached to the whole thing, because people would perhaps not want family and, you know, related parties to be brought to death sentencing. Are you someone who's concerned about that?
You see, whenever any step is taken, any reform measures are taken, it always has two sides. But one has to balance the scale, which is more important and which is more beneficial to for the improvement of the system. So merely because a family member might be shielded and therefore the harsh punishment should not be introduced, I don't think that would be the right approach in my view, because whatever you do, there's always other side of it, and there's always a tendency that the accused would try to dodge the law in whatever way it is possible. But I don't think that the family members in a heinous crime like this, of course also it's very difficult to say, it's probably for the psychoanalysts to say on this, that whether the family members would like to shield, but merely that would not be a relevant, or that should not be a relevant consideration to make the law less stringent. That is what my take is on this.
That's an important point you're making. The fact that the family might shield cannot be a relevant consideration to make the law less stringent. Let's take it to the politicians on the panel. First to you, Hitesh Jain, and then we're going to go to Shama. Hitesh, the Prime Minister said today you have a government which feels the pulse of the people and takes decisions accordingly. But the larger question is, has this been done in haste? Has this been done because there has been this sort of a public outcry? And can policy making be in reaction to public outrage and in response to public narrative? I mean, public outrage is understandable, justified, but can the process of law be linked to that?
Capital punishment per se is the most debatable subject, and the criminologist, socialist, jurist, legal fraternity is always divided. For example, during the Yaqub Memon's death sentence also, we saw the society was divided. There was a section of society who was saying why capital punishment. We saw people knocking the doors of the Supreme Court at 3 o'clock in the night also. So we have seen how capital punishment has created a debate. Now, as far as the democracy is concerned, the government of the day must have the ears to the ground and must listen to the people. This is not an outrage in the last 2 months. People have been speaking for last so many years, 6 years, 10 years, and particularly after Nirbhaya, you saw this debate coming in, and this is not just the one forum. There have been umpteen numbers of forum, umpteen numbers of demand, and there is a larger section in the society who felt that the current criminal justice system is not adequate, it is not sending, and we must do something so that we can deter people from committing the crime. But I want to make one important observation. We are only looking this amendment from the capital punishment. We are not looking that the minimum rape sentence from 7 years have been increased to 10 years. For a person below 16, it is 20 years. Now, and it is not something that the death sentence has been made mandatory. You can look at the gravity of the situation, and the law of the land is that in the rarest of the rare case, the judges apply the discretion to award the capital sentence. So I am sure this is not something that the government is going to decide, or once the government has made the letter of law, it is something that the person is going to be hanged. So a lot of thought and consideration has been applied. It has been sent in the able hands of the judiciary, who has to take, the law is very clear, they have to look at the gravity of the situation, and if it is a rarest of the rare case and justice demands the capital punishment has to be awarded, then the judges' hands are not tied, and in an appropriate case, if they feel, they can award the death sentence. So this is the take on the capital punishment.
Okay, before I go any further, and I'm going to get Shama Mohammed in just a while, because there is a question that one has to ask, and there comes a time in the stage of any nation when your consciousness kind of gets corroded. You're made to sit there and you're made to wonder that how can men and women and human beings perpetrate the sort of crimes that we have seen in the recent past, on children or on any victim for that matter. And, it shakes your consciousness, and which is why the question. But Hitesh, before I go to Shama and quickly ask her the question, which is a contra question, that is it a government listening sensitively? I have to ask you the other part and the other side of that argument, that many people believe this is a knee-jerk sort of a reaction to public outcry, And can lawmaking be based on emotions? That's the the more important question that Sandeep asked. And has this been done to placate constituents? Has this been done to deflect attention away from the deteriorating law and order all across the country?
Supriya, I do not agree. As I mentioned to earlier, don't look at this law only from the capital punishment. I explained to you how 7 years the minimum punishment has been increased to 10 years. We have also provided about the appeal, that the appeal should be fast tracked and you should decide within 6 months. There is a provision of fast track. There is a provision about the government even talking about the police reforms and other things. Coupled up with the fact the Prime Minister is also speaking about a holistic issue, not just from the legal this thing, but the Prime Minister is talking about the family, also asking the question to the boys, and the social also approach. So for the problem or to solve tackle the menace of rape, it is not just the law alone. Law, society, family, we all are stakeholders. We have to all do our part. We have to educate the people around us. We have to also behave in a manner where we will, everyone has to behave in an impeccable manner. The value system which we teach to the children, and the teachers, the value system being taught. So everything is being done from the holistic manner. We are not just saying that, okay, capital punishment awarded, our problem is solved. No, the problem is not going to be solved. The problem will be solved when there will be a robust criminal justice system where the trials can be expedited, appeals can be heard expeditiously, right. And in the some cases, if the situation so demand, then there should be capital punishment.
I take that point completely on board, Hitesh, that, a legal framework is just one part of the problem and a lot more needs to be done. Shama, and we will debate some of the points that you've raised through the course of this program. But Shama, if I could come to you, and we're back, we got the link back with you. In some sense, what is the Congress party's reaction to this ordinance? Will you concede that this is, in a sense, a signal that the government is sensitive, that the government listens to the people, that yes, there was this public outcry, yes, there was public furor, and here is a government that acted on it, put its mind together and came up with an ordinance that listened to the people? I mean, I know you could argue that it's a knee-jerk reaction, but many would say in a democracy, if the elected government doesn't listen to the will and to the will of the people, then what else does it do? What is the Congress party's reaction to this ordinance, Shama?
I believe in our country we have a lot of laws and implementation is the issue. What we need is a strong prosecution, strong investigation and definite conviction. Now here a lot of people were saying, I think the first speaker spoke about the death penalty, it's imperative, it's not it's a deterrent. Now if you go by that, we got in the Criminal Amendment Act in 2013, and after we got in that, a lot of new laws were put in. There was that law that if the rapist is a repeat offender, he gets a death penalty. If the victim is being murdered or left in the vegetative state, he gets the death penalty. Now what I would like to ask is, after the law came in 8 months the investigation was done, the trial was completed, and they were given the death penalty by the High Court. Then in 2014 we lost power, and the case went to the apex court or the Supreme Court. Now who drives the prosecution? The government of the day. We have a law ministry, we have many female cabinet ministers. So my question is, the biggest case we had, the most high profile case, was the Nirbhaya rape case. If those 4 were executed or hung, it would have been a great deterrent for the rest of the rapists or whoever, the rest of the criminals. I do not want to use that particular word. Now why haven't they been hung? If a 2G case could be fast-tracked, if a Colgate case could be fast-tracked, if a triple talaq, those things could be all fast-tracked and we got a judgment and all this, why hasn't this not been fast-tracked? Why hasn't the Supreme Court not given time to Nirbhaya's parents? Why are those criminals still living in that jail is my question. Why the government of the day did not hasten the process. Instead, they've brought in a new law. Now, like the lady who came in after, I'm sorry I couldn't get the names because I was cut off. She mentioned, right, 94% of the cases, the victim is known. The perpetrator is known to the victim, so they do not complain. And if you come out with a law that, you get a death penalty, the rapist is surely going to kill the child. In 2016, there were 64,138 child rape cases, and out of that, the conviction was 1,869. The problem, according to me, is conviction. We do not have proper investigation, we do not have conviction. Now, if you look at the case of Unnao and Kathua, it is not that the laws did not work there. One of the key thing of Criminal Amendment Act is when the victim comes to the police station, the police has to register the FIR. Now, in Unnao, the victim went to the police station. In Unnao, they refused to register her FIR. She went and protested in front of Mr. Adityanath's house, still no FIR. Finally, through the High Court, the FIR was registered. Why that? So here the law did not fail. Here the implementation of the law failed. If the lawmakers are with the perpetrators, what do? It's the same thing what happened in Kathua also. If you look at it, the lawyers prevented the crime branch from filing the FIR. So what do we do then? That is my question. Is implementation of the law is what we need, and not new laws.
Shama, Muhammad, you make an important point there. As far as, you make an important point there as far as conviction is concerned, and I want to take that point forward. But I don't want this debate to be politicized. I don't want this to be between our tenure and their tenure, because crime against women and crime against children is intolerable under any regime. And that's the broad point of this discussion. But I get your larger point on conviction.
I agree with you.
Alek, let me come to you. Is it the severity of punishment or the certainty that that is a deterrent? And why I ask this question is because the conviction rates in India, like Shama was pointing out there, are abysmally low. 24% for adults, 20% under the POCSO Act, and in 2016, for instance, there were about 64,000 child rape cases that came up before the courts. And you know what? Less than 3% ended in conviction. What purpose will any law serve if rate of conviction is going to be so low?
Right. Let me respond to you. But before that, I'll request to all my learned friends here, co-panelists here. And it's an important message which I want to send to the viewers also. Let us not mix politics, religion or anything when we are dealing with the children who are the future of our country. And we must be very, very sensitive towards that fact, and we must prioritize our children and their plight. Now, coming to the question which you have posed, you are very right. And the first round itself, I have told that merely providing death penalty will not act as a deterrent. You have to expedite it. On expediting part, I must surprise all of you, and I must share with your viewers also. In my PIL, Supreme Court, I not only prayed for death penalty, I also requested for expediting the trial. On my request, Supreme Court directed all the high courts to provide the data pertaining to pendency of POCSO Act trials and most importantly the reasons for such pendency. And today I was informed by the Registry of Supreme Court, only today I was informed that more than 600 pages have been received from various high courts across India for all district-wise POCSO Act pendency data. And we are pondering upon and we are actually discussing about the remedies and the measures by which we can actually expedite the entire process. I am not saying expedite the trial only, because like in Nirbhaya case we have seen, trial completed in hardly 8 months, but till now they have not been hanged. And I completely agree with all my co-panelists that is a wrong message which is being given to other people. So I am saying if you want to give death penalty, you have to also ensure that the actual death penalty takes place in the most time-bound manner. So let us try to evolve a solution. Let us not just focus on problem. What can be the solution? In my PIL, I have pointed out I have given 22 suggestions to Honorable Supreme Court of India. By adopting those suggestions, and now High Courts have also given their suggestions, we are trying to discuss what are the hurdles which are coming up while providing convictions and while expediting the entire process. And you must appreciate that government, be it opposing party or parties, or be it any court of law, all of us, or even we lawyers, all of us must try to provide a solution. Now, if you see the basic reasons are POCSO courts are very less in numbers. If you count across India, you have almost one court in each district in India, whereas the number of POCSO cases are increasing alarmingly. So you firstly need to increase the POCSO courts, you need to appoint judges, you need to increase the policemen. You have one policeman who has to deal with one POCSO case and 10 other cases. So how would you...
Let me interrupt you. You've raised three issues that we will debate. You've raised three issues that we will debate. you've raised three issues that we will debate on: increasing capacity and increasing police force. Those are critical issues, and this debate ought to cover that, and I hope we find the time to cover that. But let me come to you, Soumya. You know, this, as it's often said, justice delayed is justice denied, and isn't that an area of concern? Even in the Nirbhaya case, the appeal went on for years, and now the review of death sentence is in the Supreme Court. Is it, in some sense, there is this delay that is agonizing, that is frustrating, and that, you know, that perpetrates these sort of heinous crimes?
You know, you're absolutely right. In fact, I was happy that in the course of this debate, somebody also brought up the other aspects of the ordinance, which are about expediting a lot of things, which are about ensuring justice rather than just giving something much harsher. And I agree with that view because, you know, we had actually recommended this even back in the day when the Verma Commission report did come out. So if we truly do not want to politicize the issue, then both parties who are present here today on this debate, I asked them why we waited this long to come up with some of the other suggestions about how, you know, the punishment needs to be increased and how life actually means an entire life rather than just 14 years and so on and so forth. These were suggestions which aren't necessarily novel even if they've come in now. So those are, I'm not saying that the ordinance has been entirely about capital punishment, but what I did look forward to is precisely the issue that you've raised about the cases that are delayed to the extent that we think that it's justice denied. To give you an example, when as citizens we approach the state apparatus, the first point of interaction is the police thana, which then goes on to, you know, register our complaint. The complaint is then, you know, investigated. There's a charge sheet. After the charge sheet, there's a trial. After the trial, there is conviction, and then there is sentencing. The reason I keep harping on the fact that this is a populist measure is because the easiest thing to do is enhance sentencing, because you know the courts will deal with it. It will be right in the end, and before that there is so much else that can happen. There's so much time that will go by. So it's important for us to realize that what we looked for in an ordinance is harsher punishments in terms of how quickly the state responds. The fact that in the Unnao case, a year went by, the girl was a minor when she complained and she was a major by the time the FIR was registered, and that also because the media took it up as seriously as it did. And in POCSO, there is already a provision that actually reads that if within the first, you know, 6 months of the complaint the FIR is not registered, then the police stands to be, you know, arrested and put behind bars for up to 6 months. None of these procedures that are already in place were followed. So I'm not sure what we're harping up about when we keep talking of enhancing punishment and we've done nothing to work on our implementation. Not a word in the ordinance about police reforms, which is what I was most looking forward to, which is what the country most needs, something about sex education, something that will actually help us long term, you know.
Right. Soumya, you hitting the nail on its head, because police reforms and sex education and sensitization are issues that we will touch upon this debate. So just bear with me while I get to that part of the debate. But I want to talk about aspects, and you know, both you and Hitesh Jain have mentioned various aspects of this legislation, and one such aspect is, and the new ordinance does provide for a mandatory 2 months to complete trial and 6 months to dispose of all appeals. This is mandatory. It was unlike the Justice Verma committee that used words like maybe and as far as possible. I'm going to take this across to Justice Gyansudha Mishra. And ma'am, is it lack of pragmatism in the new law, or is it a sense of urgency that this is now warranted? You know, the fact that they've made it mandatory 2 months and 6 months to dispose of pleas. Do you believe this is pragmatic? And because the counter argument to that is, you know, even if it's not pragmatic, the kind of nonsense that we are seeing all around us in the society, and the crime against children and the crime against women, this needs to be done. This is warranted. Which side of these two arguments will you throw your weight behind?
See, I consider that so far as the endeavor on the part of the government is that there is sincerity to treat such a heinous crime, but there could be more. Like here right now it is an ordinance which has been issued, but if ultimately a bill is introduced and amendment is introduced by making changes in the act, obviously there would be far more deliberations and feedback on the actual amendment. So, insofar as 2 months trial period is concerned, if it is done, it's the time only will tell, you know, whether it is possible or it's a wishful thinking. But I have always maintained, and I have spoken on so many other forums, even after the Nirbhaya's rape case, that in my view, we should follow, like so far we are following the adversarial system, where we have to see that no innocent man be punished. Let 100 guilty men go scot-free, but let not one innocent man be sentenced. But in the there's a report of Justice Malimat Committee on the Criminal Law Amendment Act. In that, there is a mention about the inquisitorial system, which means that there should be, in some kind of cases, which is followed in many countries, that the victim also should have the onus to prove his innocence. So I would not go so far that the victim should have the onus to prove his innocence, but there's one very redeeming amendment that I have always, I'm a votary for that. That there should be right now we have summons case, warrant case, but there should be third category of cases for very heinous crimes, where the right now the victim's statement is taken, no doubt, but the statement of the accused and other witnesses, whether they be in favor of the accused or the victim, should be recorded like a dying declaration before a magistrate, and that should be and thereafter that should be kept in sealed covers with the right of cross examination to the accused at the time of trial. For instance, I would like to illustrate my point that supposing a crime has been committed, and straight away the accused and the witnesses be taken by the police to the magistrate, where his statement be recorded, and that should be made admissible. We have to remind ourselves that so far whatever statement is recorded before the police is not admissible, which means that it cannot be used in a court for holding the person guilty or innocent. So it is only used for contradiction.
Sure.
But if it is used even at the time of trial, and it is made relevant, maybe the time in conducting the trial can be reduced. Because right now what happens, some witness dies, some witness turns hostile. I mean, so many intervening circumstances come in between. So I guess there has to be some very redeeming changes in the CRPC in order to hold to expedite the trial.
Okay,
to put it in a nutshell, in order to have a fast track trial, we also need a fast track procedure.
Okay,
that's what I wanted to say.
That's a good point you're making. You're saying that we need to look at the CRPC as well and expedite the trial. Coming to you, Hitesh, and again, as you would have noticed, the idea is to not politicize this debate. But I have to ask you this question: the swiftness with which the government moved in the ordinance, where is that swiftness when it comes to acting on beefing up the infrastructure? I mean, you yourself made this point in your earlier remarks. There are 6,000 additional posts that are lying vacant in lower courts, 2.6 crore pending cases all across India. Supreme Court itself has 55,000 pending cases. 32% of those are pending for over 5 years. There are about 1.65 lakh pending cases in each of the high courts. Where is the infrastructure to dispose of cases early and in a time-bound manner?
Well, I don't know. First, before I respond to your question, because earlier the Congress spokesman made this thing, I don't want to trivialize this debate between Congress and BJP, or our government did this or we are doing this, because as the Prime Minister said, rape is a rape and we have to look at this as a serious offense, and that has to be dealt with it. So we cannot do into that Congress position, BJP position and all. Now, coming to your question. Now, one of the important feature of the amendment also is the time-bound manner in which the investigation has to be completed, and it has to be completed within 3 months. Now, I'm conscious of the fact what you mentioned. As a lawyer, we are witnessing this day in, day out in the courts about the delay and the backlog. Now, this is one issue, is a fair point that we have made out. Yes, we have provided time-bound investigation within 3 months. Yes, we have provided the trial should be completed on a day-to-day basis within 60 days or 90 days. We have also provided the appeal to be completed within 6 months. I completely agree with your views that this can only be possible if there is if we have a proper infrastructure into the place, and I can assure you that we will be looking into these issues also very seriously, and insofar as setting up of fast track courts or the investigating machinery for serious offences like rape, infrastructure will not be an issue or will not be a hurdle, and we are not going to come with an excuse to say that this infrastructure is a problem, therefore we cannot do. We will work with the state governments, will create a social movement against offence like this, and we will ensure that we will be able to complete this in a time bound manner. This is a collective process. This is not something like we alone or the government alone. This is everybody, every citizen of India has to come together. This is what we call people's participation, people's movement, and people also have to make this law successful. People have to also ensure that if the law has provided for the fast track, then people should also cooperate. The government will not lose sight of the fact. The government will ensure that it will play a proactive role with the help of the citizen, and I am sure we will be able to address this issue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're completely right. Every citizen in this country needs to be sensitized. Every citizen in this country needs to understand that there is perhaps no heinous crime than rape. You tarnish a woman's existence for life, a child's childhood for life, and there are absolutely no two ways about it. But Shama Mohammed, want to come to you. We quoted one National Law School of a study. We're quoting another that also says that the special courts under POCSO Act 2012 have demonstrated that one of the main causes for the low rate of conviction is the lack of infrastructure and manpower in the criminal judicial system. A, harsher punishment, will it serve any purpose without upgradation of the criminal justice system? And B, I think Justice Gyansudha Mishra mentioned witnesses turning hostile, and just for the benefit of our viewers here, want to tell them that delayed justice has actually seen 67.5% cases where witnesses turn hostile, victims turn hostile, and the testifying happens only in 26.7% cases. My question is, we have the figures here before us. We have the appalling delay, the appalling lack of sensitivity. But the reality is, why did the Congress party also not do something about it? I mean, you can say that when we were in power, we brought changes and amendments were made, and the definition of rape was widened. But why did you not do something about the judicial system? Because look at the kind of mess India's judiciary is in. And these are perhaps just very telling examples of that.
Okay, again, I do not want to, you've said you don't want to politicize, but then since you have asked me a political question, I have to give the answer to that. See, everything cannot be blamed on us. We've done our best. And in fact, if you look right now, after 2014, there is a fight between the collegium and the present government. And that's why many posts are lying vacant. You have to understand that. And having said that, another very important point is in the Justice Verma Committee report, he clearly says that the trial and investigation and trial should finish in 2 months. It's said in that also. Another important point he's mentioned is 33% of all police forces in all over India should have women, and women have to be there to file the FIR when a woman comes in, if possible, 33%, but we still have only 9%. Another important thing is the Nirbhaya fund. More than 3,000 crores are lying in the Nirbhaya fund. I would like to ask, what has happened to that? Why is it not being used? Mr. Verma also said that one-stop place should be created where women can come with their complaints, they're given medical help, legal help, all sort of help, psychological help. Now, out of that, none of these one-stop centers are functioning right now. Why is that? And I would like to know what has happened to the Nirbhaya fund. Number two, sensitize the policemen. These policemen should be sensitized in villages because they themselves don't treat women. That is very, very important. Number three, I believe all lawmakers, whether they are from my party, from BJP, from any party, whether MLAs, MPs, CMs, should be sensitive to this. I mean, they should not withdraw cases. Now, there is a case right now, because you've asked me, I don't want to politicize, but I have to say this, that Mr. Adityanath has withdrawn the case of Mr. Chinmayan. 7-year-old rape case has been withdrawn. He was the MOS with Mr. Vajpayee. Why do we do that? I mean, it's not about, again, I'm going to say, lawmakers have to protect the rest. They cannot withdraw cases such as that. This gives a bad precedence. So it is important that they also, everybody, whether it is us or it is them, that we implement what is there. You know, we have to sensitize people, very, very important. We have to have convictions.
Okay,
so
okay.
let us
So,
start
Shama,
getting
I
all these
take that point.
courts.
Shama, I take that point. Hitesh Jain wants to come in for a quick rebuttal, and then I need to go to Soumya. Hitesh, quick rebuttal from you, and then I'm going to Soumya.
I will give a political answer to a question. She is talking about 33%. In Karnataka and Punjab, you have your own government. What is the percent? You are preaching this. Do you follow this? You have your, in the state government, show that you act as a model government, complete the investigations. Your investigations are not complete within 2 years and 3 years. So idea is that please do not politicize. Don't try to compare that what we did. I think you for 57 years, you were, out of 57 years you were ruling. The judicial backlog has not occurred in last 4 years. It is a backlog of 60 years which you are trying, which we are trying to resolve and all. So we cannot get into this whole thing. This is the problem of rape where it requires a collective approach. It is not a Congress or a BJP problem. Rape is a crime against humanity, and both the parties have to unite together. We cannot have a political tu-tu mai-mai when we deal with serious offence like rape. We cannot have a political tu-tu mai-mai, and I refuse to draw into that you did this and we did this. There cannot be a political tu-tu mai-mai on offences like rape.
Hitesh, don't do that also. Hitesh Jain, I completely agree with you. Hitesh Jain, I completely agree with you. There cannot be any political tu-tu mai-mai, so you don't do any political tu-tu mai-mai also, because this is a very, very serious crime. I mean, I don't know how many of you lost sleep, how many you shed tears, but these are issues that don't let you sleep at night. It didn't let me sleep for a week when I was reading about that Katwa rape case, because this is heinous. This is happening to our children. This is happening to our women.
Yes.
We can't let politics, you know, roughshod over this. So anyways, let's not make a political issue out of this. Soumya Saxena, I'm coming to you. There has never been a bigger cry, and you mentioned police reform, so I'm going to go to that next. It is the inability, many people say, of local police to crack down, and which is why we see these high rates of crime and conviction. And according to the Bureau of Police Research's own data, only 1% of the total police expenditure is on training, and that perhaps explains why there's poor evidence collection, why there's poor sample collection, there's insensitive handling of cases like these. Where does the solution lie?
That's precisely what the problem is, and I'm glad you've raised it, because what happens is when so in private capacities, we keep conducting these gender sensitization workshops with paramilitary forces, and one of the things that was a very frequently recurring sentiment was that the police would come and tell you, but you know, majority of cases are just fake, you know, people just register it like that. So, you know, the general, you know, outlook of the police towards such a case is that they may be faking it. And I'll tell you, one of the problems that also stems from the fact that we talk so little about consensual sexual intercourse between, let's say, a couple that's aged a little below 18 and things like that, that, you know, in majority of cases, parents go and file a rape case against, you know, in case of a couple, even though it's a consensual, you know, sexual relationship, but they file a rape case against the boy because they don't approve of what is going on between the couple. And that's what gives police the impression that, you know, all of these cases are actually frivolous. So we need to talk a little bit more about, you know, sexual autonomy in people's lives. We need to talk about consent, and B, we need to train police forces to be more receptive to complaints, regardless of why someone's coming up to you. The job of the police is not to morally judge why a case has come to them, right? The job of the police is actually to just simply record. And what comes to my mind when we talk of police reform is actually the Mathura rape case, where a minor had been raped inside the police station. And this was, like, in fact, the first such case that triggered outrage and led to a change in law in the 1970s, because the judgment itself, the Mathura case judgment, the judge ended up saying something like, oh, you know, the girl is familiar with, you know, she's habituated to sexual intercourse, and therefore she cannot really be raped, and therefore both policemen in the Mathura rape case were acquitted. Now that really gives you a sense of how, you know, how large the problem is, because from our judiciary to our police to all our institutions, they're ultimately manned by human beings, right? And they're subject to all sorts of personal judgments, all sorts of conservatism that creeps its way way into our institutions, which leads to then situations of not registering such crimes, or if a person quite influential is the one who's being accused, then the police sort of hesitates. So the first thing we need to do is make these institutions so robust that they're not influenced by any political considerations or such pressures.
I'm sure no one on the panel is going to deny, is going to disagree on that point. But Justice Gansala Mishra, to elaborate on this point on police itself, in July 2017, the government told Lok Sabha that there is a shortage of 5 lakh policemen across the country. The police to population ratio in India is 180:1, 180:1 lakh, whereas the UN recommendation is 222:1 lakh. Shouldn't the focus also be on recruiting more agents of law enforcement? Is that also critical when we look at this whole issue in totality?
See, I would suggest that besides the police, there should be legal help at the police station. If somebody, like, if the crime is reported and the police refuses to record and register the FIR, if the affected party gets the legal assistance at that very time, so instead of increasing, because maybe what I'm saying is maybe slightly, it's not on the beaten track, it's slightly, you might say it's utopian also. But instead of having the police help, if you have the legal help and there's a lawyer who can take up the cause, where like I would say like an OPD for a medical help. If somebody is affected and goes to the authorized lawyer, maybe of the government or legal aid, and then he takes up the cause and talks to the police to register her FIR, maybe it will have a very effective step, and the police will be compelled to register the FIR, and the police would not have a say in that. So that method perhaps can be tried, and I for one am even trying to impress upon the former judges that let us have some legal help where we can give assistance to the victim at the threshold at the police station itself, so that if the police refuses to register the FIR, there is a legal help. Right now the legal help is in the form of a lawyer. Absolutely. That you give the lawyer who can appear before you at the stage of trial or at the appeal. But if legal help is given as a first aid justice right at the beginning, maybe it can it can work as a milestone in improving the system.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think those kind of constructive feedback, constructive solutions is what the whole India development debate is all about. And I think that's a fantastic idea to have a legal first aid kind of a thing given. But Ali, coming to you, we've debated this ad nauseum about judicial reforms, police reforms, victims being known. Now, no matter what law you pass, no matter how foolproof the legislation, if 95% of the accused are going to be known to the victim, how do you get rid of social malaise like this? I mean, what kind of effort and intervention perhaps needs to be made at a societal level on gender sensitization? What do families need to do, and how does the approach to that change? I mean, what will it take for our society to treat women as equals, to stop treating women, I mean, 8-month-old girl child as an object of lust?
That's true. It's absolutely shocking, and I'll respond to this. I'm very grateful that you have raised this point. We as a society, like me, you and all our viewers, we cannot blame always the government or the court for such heinous crime. As we all know that 90% of the cases of child abuse, child sexual abuse, the accused is always or generally known to the family. But kindly appreciate the way reporting has increased till 2012. From 2012 till 2016, lakhs of cases are being reported. So and there is a lot of reporting, but conviction rate is very, very low. So the message which is coming out, which we can draw from it, is initially when a mother comes to know that her daughter has been sexually abused by her own husband, she goes and files an FIR, and she is absolutely upset over this, and she tries to fight for the justice. But when the entire process takes 4 or 5 years, and she gradually loses her faith and her trust over the system, then from there the case starts to get weakened, and ultimately results into no conviction or delayed conviction. So that is what I am trying to emphasize. People, it is not that earlier there was no punishment. Earlier also the maximum punishment was life imprisonment, and now the maximum punishment is death penalty. And earlier also reporting was there, now also reporting will be there. It is wrong to say that now because the accused is known to the victim, so there will be less reporting and people will try to just cover it up. But my only humble request to all of the stakeholders is try to expedite before the victim and victim's parents or victim's relatives, they lose the faith. And secondly, I completely appreciate and I completely agree with the observation and the view of Honorable Justice Mishra that the legal aid right now which is being given to this victim from the government side is not effective. Yesterday I got a call from one person who informed me about a brutal rape of his 9-year-old niece, and he said that you please suggest me about a good lawyer, because I practicing in Supreme Court, it was not possible for me to go to that remote area. Right. So I said that, because I know that I came to know that he belonged to a poor family. So I said that why don't you go for a lawyer which is being provided free of cost by Legal Services Authority. And trust me, his response was that, sir, the lawyers they provide are neither interested in taking up our cases nor they are competent to take up. So my request to all of us will be, it's a holistic problem. All three major heads like government, court and the society, all three of us have to work together. These children are not only, don't only treat them as small children, they are A, the future of our country, and B, they are also workforce. If you are brutalizing them, if you are abusing them, if you are handicapping them.
Can I just come in for one point? Can I just say one thing?
Yes, Shama, very quickly.
Can I just say one thing to add to it, please? Yeah. I just want to add that we should also look into screening pedophile rapists. I mean, you know, look at we hear 8-month-old, 11-year-old, 10-year-old. Last week was 9-year-old. I have an 8-year-old son. So it's very shocking that, you know, what is wrong with our society also, we need to look at it. Absolutely. These are young children. I mean, we have to look into that, the psychological aspect. We need to start screening whether there are something called pedophile rapists. You know, what is happening into our society? It's brutal when you hear this, you know. Absolutely. Why are they going after little children? Right. So this is what we also need to look into, you know.
Very quickly, Hitesh, I'm going to let you have the last word since you represent the government. And, you know, I think in this debate, it's evident. It's not the government's problem. It's not right to blame the government or the judiciary. The society is equally to be blamed. And, you know, while the Prime Minister has sort of spoken about it and how it needs to bring about societal change, how easy is it going to be? What does the government really intend to do to bring about the societal change, you know, which is going to take a lot of effort?
See, we will have to treat this like a social movement, and we will have to create an awakening. We will have to change the attitude and the mindsets. This chalta hai attitude will not serve. We will have to change the attitude and mindset when we make a comment on offences like this, how we treat the incidents in the police station, in the court, in the judiciary, even as a society. When an offence is reported, kind of reaction we make, the political leader reacting, we all need to learn lessons from this. This is a serious issue where society is affected. Any person can be affected. Today, you, me, anyone, I mean, we can be an unfortunate who can be affected by this. So this is a serious issue. We should deal with this and we have to, there should be an attitude and a mindset change to deal with an offense like this.
Right. No, I can't agree with you, and on a parting note, I can't agree with you more on this, because rape is a mindset. It's not just a heinous crime. It is a mindset. It's about subjugation and dominance. But when it comes to children being abused, I think only a beast can do at least stories that we are picking up and stories that we are reading in media and the kind of heinous crimes that are happening. And it can't be left to the government. It can't be left to the police. It can't be left to the judiciary. I think we as a society need to awaken. We as a society need to be less tolerant of a crime like that. And only then will perhaps civilize like that elude our society. But on that note, thank you very much for joining us, each one of you.
Thank you for this wonderful panel, for joining us on this constructive dialogue on the India development debate. That's the endeavour every night at 9 p.m. on ET Now. Up next is Top 10 at 10 with Tanya. Keep it with ET Now. Good night.